What's up guys, my name is Dean, aka the Blue Crusader, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing a brand new Minecraft mod showcase. This has been a really highly requested one. In one of my most recent videos, the top 10 Minecraft horror mods, one of the missing mods which a lot of people wanted me to include, which actually happened to be released after I made that video, was a brand new mod called Scape and Run Parasites. Scape and Run Parasites is this crazy new Minecraft mod which adds parasitic entities into the game which can mutate and evolve, and it's just the craziest horror mod and most impressive one that I've seen so far. So we're going to be reviewing that in this video. I'm going to be showing you as many of the mobs in the mod as I can, and also the features and what's included in the mod. If you want to see more Minecraft horror mods that are awesome just like this one, do check out the link in the description below. I am going to include a link to the top 10 Minecraft horror mods video if you haven't seen that already. So let's get into the mod and let's check this one out. Okay, so basically this mod adds parasite-themed mobs into your Minecraft world, and it also adds them into the other dimensions too, which is super interesting because most mods usually only add things to the overworld, so you'll have them in the normal overworld and also the other dimensions in game. I'm not sure if it actually supports custom dimensions, but it does support the vanilla dimensions, which is really interesting, so it is a multi-world mod. And a lot of these parasites are actually dangerous, and they're super scary and have their own abilities. And what's one of the most interesting features which I've seen in this mod personally, and I am going to show you a few of the features in a minute, basically these mobs can actually learn from the fights that they have in game and evolve from them. Now that's probably the coolest thing. That's why the AI and behavior of these mobs are so complex in this mod. And what makes them so dangerous is they don't burn in the daylight like normal zombies and skeletons do. Not only are they hostile to the player though, they're actually hostile to skeletons and zombies. They actually will attack other evil mobs in the nighttime and also infect them too. So this is a crazy mod. It's not your typical bad guys mod. Okay, so let's jump into the mod and spawn a few of these creatures, and let's just get down into it. So as you can see, we have a few different blocks here. As you can see, these are just the normal blocks and items which include with the mod. And what's interesting is these parasites are not spawned with your typical spawn eggs like in normal Minecraft. We spawn them with these spores. You literally spawn them with parasite spores. How cool is that? And there's actually quite a big list of these parasites, okay? So I'm going to spawn a few of the mobs and show you them. So the first one I'm going to spawn you is this infected Alapha, okay? The Alapha is of unknown origin. Just look at this crazy thing. It's like this huge gigantic wasp. It's a flying parasite which basically flies around your world. And this is one of the parasite victims which has the ability to fly and also shoot missiles. So this is some strange parasitic creature that also shoots missiles. Let me quickly switch to my game mode into survival, and I'll give you a little bit of a preview. So these guys will basically stalk the player, and they're very frightening, okay? Now this guy's just lingering above me. I don't know why he's choosing not to attack me, but if you were just wandering around in your world and you saw one of these huge things, bear in mind that one of my phobia is wasps. So if I was running inside a jungle in Minecraft, had this mod installed and somehow forgot it was installed, imagine the terror which I would actually feel if this thing was following me. So these are like these huge giant wasps, so if you don't like insects with wings, you're probably not going to like this mob. So next up is the infected cow. So this is one of the first vanilla infected mobs, and you can hear the sounds of these cows are also equally terrifying, just as much as the flying insect was. But these are basically some of the infected vanilla mobs. So obviously when a cow's infected, it will basically transform into this, which is an infected cow. Now what's different to the normal vanilla cows is obviously the legs look a little bit more detailed, and also there's extra joints in how the cow actually walks, and it has this strange mouth which opens and closes in a really terrifying manner with all these weird like spores and red spots coming off it, which actually move from side to side and up and down. So the amount of detail in the skins is pretty crazy in this mob. Cows in Minecraft are usually weak, and usually, unfortunately, we do just kill them for no reason. But cows are going to strike back a little bit with this mod. So those are infected cows, and when you kill them, this is what makes this mod interesting. So let me just give you a little bit of a showcase. When you kill these infected cows, something special will happen. Okay, you kill them and they will drop infected flesh. So basically when you kill them, you see what's inside, so you can actually gather infected flesh every time you kill those cows. Next up, of course, is along with infected cows, you also have infected humans. Okay, so these are living individuals controlled by the parasites who hunt along the creatures that the humans once fought, ironically, and then they got ended up turned into parasites. So this is what the infected humans look like in the mod. these guys are so spooky. Just look at these. They kind of give me the same vibes as those zombies from Half-Life 2. I'll try and put a picture on the screen if you don't know what I'm talking about. But basically, the zombies in Half-Life 2 kind of remind me of this. Like, they have these huge, long finger spores that come out of the hands, or these, like, growths that kind of move along, these spiny little hand growths. And they have the same strange mouth, just like cows. And they make this horrible screeching squeal sound. So, if there was multiple infected humans running at you in this mod, it would definitely not be a sight to be seen. If you want me to make a video surviving in this parasite mod versus all these different parasites, then comment below and tell me if that's a good idea, because I'm thinking about making a video surviving in a world versus all these parasites. Next up, infected sheep. Okay, the third vanilla mob, okay? So just like the cows, these are just an infected variant of the sheep, which all seem to make those horrible blood-curdling scream sounds, which are really off-putting. And you can see these guys, the back of the body, not so pretty, not so nice at all. And obviously, if we kill them, they drop the same just as cows do, which is this infected flesh stuff. Not really sure what we use that for just yet, but that's not so important at this stage. And then also infected wolves. So basically all these mobs, they kind of perform the same. They're just infected versions, and they have these moving growths, which are kind of like infected spores. And when we kill them, you'll see that they all make similar sounds. These wolves take an extra hit, but this particular one explodes. Now, when this wolf explodes, it leaves behind this small little worm thing, okay? And then when we kill this also splits into another worm thing. So basically, it has the chance to split into different parasites, which are basically taking control of the host. So those are the little parasites taking control of the host, and they can also split and multiply too, which is also really cool. Next up is the buglin. So these are insect-like creatures, and they're found inside infected victims. So if you just saw these buglins, or these parasites, which I was just talking about with these wolves, these are what just came out of the wolf. These buglins, these are the infected creatures, which are like insects found inside victims. So kind of like how in Alien you have like a chest burst after the face huggers attach onto victims. These are kind of like those, like parasites that kind of embody the host. So these are pretty dangerous guys that you probably wouldn't want to be inside you if you were infected by a parasite. And just like in real life, you do have cures for most parasites, but in Minecraft, I'm pretty sure they haven't developed a cure versus these guys. So definitely something you don't want to catch. Then there's the Ruptor. So this is another insect-like creature. And basically, these guys can infect cows, sheep, and wolves and make them fight for the parasite side. So if you saw those infected versions of the animals, these guys are what infect those. Okay, so just for an example, this guy's near horses right now, but let's just bait something to happen. Let's spawn a cow nearby. These guys will chase the cow, use these horrible little tentacles, and infect the cow and turn the cow into a parasitic infected cow. So these guys are pretty treacherous, and they'll basically increase the army of parasites that they have at their disposal to fight for in their army. So these guys can infect all those vanilla mobs which I showed you at the start of the video. So they're pretty interesting ones, and they can be pretty dangerous. Then we have the heavy carrier. Okay, so this one is a large carrier. This is kind of like on Halo when you have the flood and you have those really big fat ones. I'll try and put a picture on the screen as well, just in case you don't know what I'm talking about. But these guys are really fat, bulging parasites, and I'm almost certain that these were actually inspired by the flood carriers off Halo because they perform exactly the same. So basically, they have a large health bar, so they will take a lot of damage to actually kill these guys. But they may explode spontaneously, just randomly, and release additional minions which are immune to poison. So these guys are also pretty dangerous. So if we just attack this guy, we can't really bait him into exploding right now. But for an example, if we would go into survival mode and spawn him in here, you can see he will actually bulge and explode into all these creatures. And if you're wondering what creatures come out, well, all of these Ruptors come out, which I've shown you, and all these flying carriers too. So those heavy carriers can split up into multiple parasites, and they're pretty dangerous too. Then we have the flying carriers. So these are small flying creatures. These are not the flying creatures over here, which I just showed you. This is actually a flying carrier, okay? So basically, these guys can also explode randomly and release additional minions. So basically, the heavy carrier and the flying carrier are very similar. They just take on different forms and they release a different number of minions, I guess. These guys perform exactly the same. So if I was also to go into survival mode, this guy would fly up to me, and then he would split up and release all these Ruptors. So as you can see, that was a pretty quick and swift death that I just experienced right there. So they're basically just as dangerous as each other. So let's get on to the really beefy and juicy features of this mod, okay? So here's some more creatures which will make you really surprised and just in awe, okay? So these ones are really cool too. So the first one we're going to spawn is the Vigilante, okay? So let's spawn this guy. This guy is absolutely huge. He looks like he's one of those tripods off War of the Worlds or something. Basically, these are built for territory defense purposes. So you'll only find them on infected terrain. If you didn't know, in the Scape and Run Parasites mod, the parasitic infection basically spreads via the terrain system in game. So there's infected dirt or soil, and basically it will spread across multiple biomes until the whole world's infected. So that's how the parasitic infection in survival mode will actually spread throughout your world and cause just pure rampage. So these guys will only spawn on infected terrain as the infection spreads. Then we have long arms. Okay, so this is another creature. I don't really know too much about this creature because there isn't really any given information about it on the website, but they look really awesome. Like, they have these bent hind legs and these clawed feet and these really long arms with this massive two-sided head with an open jaw. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Siren Head for some reason. So this is the Rika, okay? So basically the Rika is a four-limbed creature that's fast and it can actually poison its victims. So when this attacks you and follows you, they have insanely fast mobility, and also to accompany this, they have really high damage. So these are definitely really tough to fight. Now, I'm not going to give you an example of the kind of damage they do because I don't want to die right now, but you don't want to face one of these guys, trust me. Next up is the Summoner. So this is a four-legged beast as well, very similar in how it looks to a lot of the other parasites. But the interesting thing about this one, which makes this one so unique, is the fact that it summons additional parasites to fight for it, okay? Let me just give you a little bit of a demonstration. And for this, I'm obviously going to have to give myself good armor and a good weapon, because otherwise I'm definitely not going to survive this. But let me just give you a quick demonstration in survival mode, okay? So we're going to give ourselves the right protection, just so this thing doesn't attack us or doesn't kill us. Okay, boom. So this guy, the first one we spawned, is going to poison us, and then this Summoner over here has the chance to spawn additional enemies. So just imagine if all three of these are running at you at once, and the long arms is the one that killed me because he has additional range too. So each of them unique abilities and pretty dangerous. Next up is the Yellow Eye. So you have seen these a little bit earlier in the mod showcase because when I destroyed one of the carrier forms, it summoned these Yellow Eyes. Basically, these Yellow Eyes are flying parasitic minions that basically can fire ranged missiles at you. So if you go near these guys, they will actually attack you from a range and basically damage you until you die. So let me just go into survival mode, and you can see these guys are going to kind of chase me and lunge for me, and they can also shoot these strange particles at me too. So it's kind of like dart needles that they actually fire out of their front face. Next up is the Mandicators. So these Mandicators are kind of like dogs. You can see that they kind of look like devil dogs or demon dogs. But the reason why these guys are dangerous in particular is they can actually go invisible. Okay, so one thing that makes them particularly tough is sometimes they have a chance to go invisible. Now, for the most part, they will attack you, and they'll do a lot of damage while they do it, but there's a chance that they'll completely go camouflaged, and that's where the real trouble will start. Now, before we move on to the truly most terrifying and overpowered mobs in the whole mod, let's first cover the Bolster, okay? So, the Bolster is this weird creature which kind of looks like some parasitic baby. It kind of looks like something which would be from the game The Forest that you'd find underground. These really slow crawling creatures that make these flesh-like sounds, and basically they have the ability to buff nearby parasites, and that's why they're called the Bolster, because they actually bolster the power of the surrounding minions. So basically it supports the general parasite faction, and any parasites that surround it are going to get a big buff and damage increase and basically just general ability increase while being around these guys. So these should definitely be a target to kill first if you're surrounded by endless waves of these minions, because they'll basically enhance the abilities of every minion around them and make them even more dangerous. Now, the part which I've been waiting for the most in this video now is to cover these two mobs. Now, these two mobs are really interesting because these are ancient mobs, okay? So we have the Dreadnought and we have the Overlord. So we're going to first show you the Dreadnought. And this is a massive flying parasite, okay? So look at this. This looks like something from Stranger Things. And as you can see, this thing will just hover over the world with these floating legs, which just drift back and forth in the wind. And if this thing was hovering towards you, it would be a pretty tough challenge. And it has some really cool sounds and animations. Now, this is technically a boss mob. It doesn't have a boss health bar, but this is one of the tougher mobs in game. And that's why it's called the Ancient Dreadnought, because basically it's an ancient parasite which has been around for many years and it's gathered a lot more power than the other parasites. So this is going to be one of the end game parasites to defeat. So definitely be aware with this one. And if you're worried about parasites which fly at you from the skies, then let's take a look at one which drifts on the ground. So this is called the Ancient Overlord, okay? This is slightly bigger, but obviously it has to make up for not being able to fly with increased size in comparison to the Dreadnought, which can actually fly. So this is just a massive walking parasite which can walk on the ground. And if you happen to run into one of these, well, you're going to be not in for some great luck, because this one is super powerful. And it has so many eyes on its front face. It reminds me of like when you see a tarantula really close up. This definitely brings the horror factor. And this is definitely why this mod is one of the scariest mods you're going to find in Minecraft. Now let me touch on some more features as part of the mod. So I've basically showed you most of the mobs. I haven't showed you the extra small parts like floating heads and limbs that come off of the different creatures. I've shown you most, if not all, of the generalized creatures. So I'm going to show you these. These are called adapted mobs. So these are basically adapted or evolved versions of the mobs. So you can see we have the adapted long arms, which is basically a different color, and his limbs look like he's going to do a lot more damage and power. Then we have the adapted summoner. So you can just compare what these look like to the originals. They're basically enhanced versions of them. For an example, this Rika, I haven't actually shown you this, but this is one of the mobs. This is the adapted Rika, okay? So this guy looks pretty dangerous too. And basically the adapted mobs are just versions that have evolved or become more powerful. So you can see we have the adapted Mangicator, which is basically that demon dog looking thing I showed you before, but it has this skull face now. So it definitely looks different in appearance. We have the adapted Yellow Eye, which was one of those really tiny floating ones, but this one is absolutely this one's absolutely huge now and has this spinal rib cage jousting from the back of its body. So this one looks even more scary. And finally, the adapted bolster. So this is just a much larger version. So the bolsters that buff all of the enemies around them. This one now looks like some kind of like spider queen that you just find in like some hive. So yeah, the adapted version's even scarier. And if you didn't think that things could get scary in this mod, well, they can. And even so, now you can see this guy is actually spreading the infected soil or the infected turf. So when I was talking about the whole parasite infection spreading in your world, this is how it happens. They basically vibrate and then give off this infected liquid which coats the land, and then it starts to spread. So that's how things start in the world, and then things can get out of hand very quickly if you let that spread. So just like Terraria with the corruption, you need to be on top of it to prevent things getting worse. So let's just gloss over a few things in the mod and explain a few of the systems before the end of the video. So the mod has something called the reinforcement system. So when you kill a parasite, for an example, there is a chance that it can call surrounding reinforcements to actually fight for it. This means it will beckon and spawn nearby mobs to fight around it, meaning the fight will become tougher. This is because they basically are stronger in numbers. And there's actually a mob called the Beacon, which has different stages, and that will tell you how many of parasites will spawn around it. And these mobs also can infect the surrounding nearby blocks, and these infected blocks can also damage all the mobs that aren't in the parasite faction or who haven't been infected yet. A lot of these things in the mod can also be configured too, so if you want to change a lot of things like the spreading of the infection rate, how powerful a lot of these mobs are and what they do, you can actually change them in the config file, which means the mod is highly customizable. Now the merge system, which I haven't really shown you just yet because it's quite hard to simulate or emulate without being in survival mode and going against these guys, but basically infected mobs in this mod, they have the ability to learn from their battles, which I told you about earlier, and basically if the right conditions are met in the mod, they'll start to melt until they're just moving flesh on the ground, and then after they become the moving flesh, two of them meeting will fuse together and merge and then begin to grow. And this is how, if they get big enough, it will spawn a primitive mob. So basically I showed you these adapted mobs, which are the second stage, and then I also showed you the primitive mobs. So for an example, this is the adapted bolster, which is stage 2, and this is the primitive bolster. So the primitive bolster will actually spawn when melted parasites form together and fuse to create basically a super entity. So that's how the normal primitive parasites are created. Now the infected can only turn into moving flesh if the infected reaches the primitive kill count required, and it needs to be next to 3 more infected around it, regardless of the kill count of the mobs. Or it needs to be next to another moving flesh for this to happen too. So there's a lot of different requirements and prerequisites for this, but it's basically a recipe for disaster. So after talking about the beacon mob, which has the different stages, it only makes sense if I actually show you the actual mob itself. So this is beacon stage 1, which as you can see, it's just kind of like a tentacle or mandrill which just comes out of the ground. Then we have beacon stage 2, which is a lot bigger one. This looks like some kind of weapon arching from the ground. And then we also have beacon stage 3, which is predominantly quite larger. Now, the interesting thing about this is, like we said before, with how the whole spreading of infection works, you can actually see underneath it that the infection is already beginning to spread. So the first block which it will infect is the block below it, and then things obviously consistently start spreading around it. So this is the whole system in how the parasitic infection starts, spreads, and then gets out of control. And that is the Scape and Run Parasites mod. So this is my mod showcase on the mod. Do go in the link in the description below to check out 10 more horror mods for Minecraft, which are just like this one if you want to try something different. The mod download will also be linked down below too. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe with notifications turned on if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.